Okay, today I'm in the garage with a used and somewhat abused e-bike to give it a full stripped down service, to give you an idea of what needs doing, and also some of the running costs involved with looking after an eMTB. Right, so this bike has been ridden by my good friend Rich, who has a bit of a reputation in the GMBN office for being fairly hard on bikes, should we say. It's still quite low mileage, less than 400, but it's been ridden in the worst of the British weather, and that does bring its own problems that can be quite costly. Job number one is to give this thing a clean, because as you can see, Rich hasn't done that, unfortunately, but I will do that and then give this bike a quick once over to see what condition it's in. Right, so we have a clean bike. I'm going to give the bike a quick inspection. Both of us are, aren't we, Paddington? And I can see already there's some sort of scratch marks on the mech. Bit of something there. That could be sealant, to be fair. That's a bit of tree sap. There's some marking on the seat post, definitely. And you can see the forks had quite a hard time as well. But there's plenty of things to get at, I'm sure. Actually, the cables feel pretty good on this bike, but as I'm taking it apart, stripping it down, it would make sense to replace the inners anyway. But also sort out some of this cable routing. It's got these little clips that Canyon provide, but that could definitely be a bit better. Shorten some of these outers, I think, and neaten this bike up. Right, let's get it into the stand. Right, so I'm going to give this bike a full service, like you would find probably in a shop. I'm going to take the whole thing apart, check the drivetrain for wear, take the battery and the motor out, check for any water ingress, anything might need addressing in there. Take the wheels out, check the bearings, refresh the sealant, check the suspension bearings. I'm actually going to do a lower service on the fork and an air can service on the shock as well. So all these things a shop would do, and I've looked into this. The cost would probably be about £200 plus for this, and add on to that parts as well. So I'm going to do this myself. Obviously, it's going to be cheaper than taking it to a shop, but there is some costs involved already. Like seals for those suspension services. So I'll give you a running total at the end to see how much this will cost, but also give you an idea on kind of how far down the line things are, like the suspension bearings and the drivetrain. Like I said, it's only done less than 400 miles, so I'll check the condition of those and I'll give you an update as I go. Okay, slowly but surely stripping the bike down and actually trying to clean it up as I go as well. So it's a good opportunity to get, I use this PT's Protect and Shine. Spray that onto a rag and give it a really nice clean as you go. So when you put the bike back together, a little mega, but spray this onto your rag so you don't get any of that going on to things like disc brakes or pads. And just give it a good inspection. So it's really a good idea to go through the bike, check for any damage, and have a really good look at it. And the first thing I've noticed, actually, is I've taken the cranks and chainring off. I can actually see there's a loose bolt down here. So holding this chain guide on, actually, it's a 4mm. I'm going to take it off anyway because I'm going to need to take that off to take the motor and then the battery out of the bike. But interesting to see there's a loose bolt there. Luckily, my garage is not too bad at the moment, but it's good to clear out your space and lay things out as you go. I'm going to put the chain through a proper deep clean in a second. I will service the pedals, make sure all this stuff is clean. And also I've got a nice little spot over here to keep my little parts so that I'm not going to lose anything when it comes to putting them back together. Right, it's coming apart. Cranks have come off. I'm going to deep clean the drivetrain. Now I'm going to spin it around the stand and get that motor out. So Rich's bike is a Canyon Strive on CFR. So it's Bosch motor, and actually you can see how it's got this sort of casing on the bottom of it. Once you whip that off, you can get access to the battery and then the motor. can see how it sits quite close actually. But also you can see how it is a bit dirty in here. So as much as I'm not going to open the motor, it's definitely worth doing this occasionally. It's just to get the motor off, clean around it, and make sure nothing's going to get in or get close to the seals on this motor. It's definitely worth taking it out and cleaning it up. So super simple to slide these batteries out. You can see it's actually quite wet. I've obviously washed the bike, but there's some dirt in there as well. So I'm definitely going to want to clean that off and investigate that a bit further. Although the connections up here do look nice and dry and clean. I want to see if I can stop any water getting in there. Right, motor off the bike. You see it is a bit dirty, a bit grimy, but yeah, good condition. Flip it over. Again, a bit of water on the top. Nothing that can't be cleaned off, of course. And the connectors are a little bit wet in there. Get that on the workbench. I'll let it drop. And let's check out the rest of the bike. Also now, so I've got the motor out. You can see where some of the cables run inside there. I can actually get a bit easier access now because it's going to be time to start sorting out that cable routing. I am going to bleed the brakes. I'll get into that in a sec, but I will first start dealing with those cables and the headset. Digging into the headset, you can see this is a headset cable routed bike. And the outside of the headset looks good, but you can see water on that compression spacer there. So this is where the water is getting inside the frame, definitely. So I'm going to take this out. I need to sort the cable lengths out, like I said already, but I'm going to try and seal this a bit better if I can. Try and re-grease this bearing. I think it looks okay, but I might as well inspect it, re-grease it, and try and stop some of this water getting through this top headset cap. You see the state of that as well. That's the bottom headset cup. So that is dirty, so I need to try and fix that as well. Right, I don't have a parts cleaner, but I do have some takeaway boxes. So I'm going to sort out these headset cups doing it in here. Obviously, good idea to wear some gloves. And I think black latex gloves are essential because they look metal. And if the Jehovah's Witnesses show up at your front door and you answer the door with some shiny black gloves on and you say you're busy, they won't ask you twice what you're doing. So put them on, and I've got some solvent degreaser here to sort out, because it's actually this lower one is a bit rough, whereas the upper bearing is dirty, but inside feels okay. So I'm going to leave those seals as they are. I'm going to give this lower set a nice clean using this solvent degreaser. So now I'm going to gently try and prise off one of these seals on the lower race using a Stanley knife blade, but without trying to damage it. So really gently prise it off to have a look inside. Now, what I need to do is try and dry that out. So still some solvent degreaser in there. So I will either let it evaporate, I'm going to blow it out with the airline, and then I can repack that. It doesn't feel too bad. It doesn't need replacing just yet. Next job is to take the shock out, because I'm going to do an air can service on that, but also then I can check the condition of the linkage bearings. Okay, to the wheels next. This bike has got some Industry 9 carbon wheels, mixed wheel size actually. I am going to check the spokes and the hub bearings, so I need to take a cassette off. And on the rear, I'm going to change the tyre because this tyre is well worn out, but I'm going to refresh the tubeless sealant front and rear. Bearings inside the hub are spinning nice and freely, but you can see it's a little bit dirty in there. So I'm going to give that a clean out, and I'll use some of the PT speed grease on there, and away we go. All right, if you have a Bosch powered e-bike, you may be interested in these new valves from PTs. These are an MX tubeless valve set that accommodate that speed sensor. So on the rear of your Bosch bike, on that rear wheel, you have the speed sensor mounted beneath that valve. So actually PTs will now sell you a pair of MX valves, one with that longer valve for that rear speed sensor, and then with the normal size front 42mm, rear one is 60mm. So brand new from PTs, available in all sorts of colours as well. So I've taken the rear mech off, and if you can see on there is some slight scraping. So it's obviously been dragged along something. So I'm definitely going to need to check how straight this is. I mean, you need to do this on the bike really, but it looks okay. I will say these jockey wheels aren't spinning very nicely, so I will put some light grease in there. I'll also check the alignment of the rear hanger, so when I've got the back wheel back in, I can see how straight that is. I've got a tool for that. And I'm also going to give the drivetrain, I give the chainring a good clean, but also I'm going to drop my chain, or Richard's chain to say, in to my takeaway tub and give that really thorough degrease as well. So I've brushed the motor down so it's nice and clean, make sure there's no mud building up around any of the seals. It's dried out as well. I've also sprayed some contact cleaner inside there where the connectors go in, and I'll put some electrical grease on there when I start to reassemble. So it's nice and clean. Like I say, there's the mounts that I've got any dirt away from there as well, so they're nice and clean. For it to go back into the bike, and then need to make sure those bolts are torqued up correctly. Okay, so I'm piecing it all back together now. Got the motor back in, rear mech back on, fork and shock as well. And I'm going to deal with this mess of the cables as well. So I've completely sealed that headset as best as I can, packed all the grease within that top cap. Now I'm going to sort the cables out. So I've moved these two actually. To begin with, the rear brake hose is going one side and the dropper lever is going the other. So I've tagged those two together to wrap around the head tube and go down this side. And then swapped the shifter cable to go the other side. So it just works a bit nicer. Now I need to shorten the dropper post and the rear mech cable, and I'm going to put fresh inners inside there. And then I can work on some grease inside these seals as well to finish off the sealing of that headset. But I'm pretty much getting there, I think. Got freshly clean drivetrain, re-lubed, new gear cable, and actually it's not shifting that nicely. So what I've done is put this derailleur hanger alignment gauge on there, and actually the hanger, it seems to me, it isn't perfectly straight. So it's UDH. I think it's probably worth just ordering a new one. However, as soon as I've got the tool, I'm going to try and manipulate it, try and bend it back, and that has to be absolutely in line, parallel with this rear wheel for it to shift nicely. So it's definitely a little bit out. So as much as it's worth getting a new one, I am going to try and fix it first. Right, got it. Straightened that hanger, it's made a big difference. I'm about to tweak the cable tension and the stop limits again, but it's running sweet now. So So we definitely see from that rear mech that it's been banged in something, and that's why I wasn't shifting very well. Actually, so I've done the brakes, I've bled the brakes, fitted new brake pads. They did have some left on them, but really close to being worn out and onto that metal spring in the middle. So it's time to put some freshies in, as I was bleeding them as well, so it sounds really good. Get nice fitting brakes again. However, I have seen that this rear disc has seen a bit of action as well, so it's hit something. It's running fairly good. I've just centered the caliper, but there is a slight bend in there, so I've got my bending tool. And I mean, it's not bad by any means, so I'll try and get rid of that and make it run as nice as I can. I really don't like it when you can feel your rotors rubbing against the calipers, and it's going to slow you down as well. Okay, so Rich's bike is back complete, and he obviously is fairly heavy, I would say, on bikes, judging by the rear mech and that rear disc as well being slightly bent in, but totally fixable, so that looks good. Pedals are quite scratched up, but I gave them a full service on the inside as well, so they're spinning nice and freely. I did a lower service on the fork and an air can service on the shock as well, which is recommended around every 50 hours. So I'm probably slightly early on that, but it might be about right, to be fair. The oils that came out were fine, not very dirty at all, but it's nice to give them a freshen up and get that nice small bump sensitivity on those as well. The bearings on the rear end, like I said, were absolutely fine, so didn't need to do anything with those. Same with the bushings on the shock. Interestingly, some bike manufacturers like White actually do a lifetime guarantee on the linkage bearings, so if you have a White, definitely take advantage of that. I did address the headset, so I've packed their top headset cuppers as much as I can with grease to try and stop any water getting in there. I've actually made a nice little plug as well for one of the holes that was free. There's a cable hole actually open on that headset cap, so that might be why there was water getting in there. So hopefully that's going to stay nice and dry in there. But if you do have a bike like this, it's probably worth occasionally just dropping the battery out and letting it air out and everything dry as well. So obviously I've done this at home, so it's worth planning in a time when you can do this. Maybe a couple of days when you're not going to be riding your bike. I have taken 2 days to do this, to be fair, but luckily, I say luckily, but I'm recovering from injury at the moment, so if this was my bike, I wouldn't be able to ride it anyway. But you know, that is one of the disadvantages probably of doing it yourself. You're not going to maybe have the spares, or if you run into any issues, maybe you need to order some bearings, then you might have to wait a couple of days. I do have a pretty well stocked garage here, so I've got inner cables and things like that. So I've had pretty much everything I do need to do this, but there are some disadvantages to doing it yourself, and that is probably it's going to take a bit longer. But let's get into the costs. What it cost me to look after Rich's bike for 6 months worth of use. Right, to the desk and my pad. I actually do like to keep a record of things like this as well, kind of a service record. I think this is nice to have so you know what you've done, but also if you're going to sell this bike in the future, you can give kind of proof as well, like you would from a shop. You'd get a print out of all the jobs that have been done. So this 6 month service, so I start off with two inner cables, and they were for the shifter and for the drop post. Obviously I had the motor and the battery out. It's a really easy and convenient time to do it. They were only £3 each, so that's £6 for those two. Then the seal kit for the fork. I actually only used the foam seals then because the foam ring, I should say, because the seals are fine. So the seal kit is £27.95. Didn't use all that. All I used was the two foam seals, and that comes to £5. And then the rear shock service kit, it's a Fox shock on this, that came to £38. Brake pads, I went fresh front and rear. There was some life on those, but they are £33 each, so that's 66 quid. Shimano Quick Link, obviously I split the chain to give it a really good degrease and then re-lube. They're £10. Now, they do recommend that you don't reuse your old one, although I've done that plenty of times and it's been fine. I will add that £10 on there because I bought one. I'm going to save the old one. Rich can have that as a spare, so it's always worthwhile keeping hold of those. Like I say, definitely can be used in emergency. Then to a fresh tyre. So I put a new Pirelli Scorpion S, the eMTB model on there. £70 for that. And then sealants, that was the last cost. About £5 for two tyres worth. Obviously I had the big 25 litre tub, which makes good sense if you're doing this regularly. So total comes to £200. Obviously, the majority of that is the brake pads and the tyre, which are consumables anyway. If you take those away, the actual pure service costs for this today was £64, which I think is pretty reasonable. Obviously, if you're going to go to a bike shop, it's going to cost you a lot more than that. I really do enjoy doing it myself. I enjoy tinkering in my garage. I've got a good setup, to be fair. I built this especially. I've done it out really nicely because I really enjoy doing this. I like spending the time also learning about my bike as well. It's just nice to take them apart. So if you're into it, I do think it's well worthwhile to do it yourself. There's just a couple of things I'll tell Rich is probably he wants to order himself a new lower headset bearing and another UDH derailleur hanger, because I did rebend that one back just a touch. I think it's all right, but I would definitely think about getting another one because they're fairly cheap. And that headset is fine for now, but I think at the next service he'll probably want to replace that. So that is worth knowing. And I think his bike is looking great. It's, virtually as good as new, or even some parts are probably, greased and sealed slightly better than new. So it's well worth doing. It's going to keep your bike going. Obviously, hopefully that's going to stop water ingress into your motor as well, and drying out the battery is well worthwhile. But it's really nice to inspect your bike and know what needs doing in the future. Like I said, like the lower headset bearing. Suspension is great. Possibly after the end of the winter, I think maybe the bearing on the rear suspension is going to need looking at. Depends. We'll see how wet this winter is. And the other thing to bear in mind is that at home, you're probably not going to be able to get into the full diagnostics of the motors. I've checked for any updates for this. Bosch motor is absolutely fine. But if there are anything like error codes showing, you might need to go to your local dealer anyway. But get involved. If you want to learn how to do things like the suspension servicing that I've done, like the air can and the lowers, then head over to GMBN Tech. They are our sister channel, and they've got loads of great videos for doing that and for learning to look after your bike yourself. But I definitely think it's worthwhile, and it'll save you loads of money over the long run.